So earlier this year, we did a video called what was it? 5 mistakes to avoid when planting camellias, and it was very successful, and a lot of people watched it. But we had a few complaints, and the biggest complaint was that the sound wasn't very good. People enjoyed the video, but they couldn't hear everything I was saying because the background music was a little bit too loud for them on the device that they were playing. So I thought, well, okay, well, that's not very helpful. So what we'll do is we'll redo that video, hopefully go over some of the more salient points, and hopefully add a few more things that will help avoid you having problems when growing your camellia. So mistake number one, and is the most common mistake that people make when they're planting up their camellia plants, and that is to use the wrong compost. Now, hopefully you'll know that camellias are from the Ericaceae family, which is your Erica family, which is your heath family, which is where you get your heathers from, which is why heath, heather. Anyway, so the thing is that because they're Ericaceous, that means that they require an acidic soil, and they need that acidity in the soil, because if it's not acidic, then these plants they struggle to take up iron, and without the iron, then they struggle to make the chlorophyll pigment. So if they're grown in regular soil, slightly alkaline soil, what you'll find is you will get yellowing of the leaves and you'll get stunted growth. So that's a really big one. It's a really common problem with camellias. So that's the first one. Number one, always plant in an ericaceous compost or an acidic soil. If you haven't got acidic soil, then either grow it in a pot, which isn't brilliant because they tend to dry out, or plant it in the ground, but dig a bigger hole, a wider hole, backfill it with your ericaceous compost. And if you need to, you can always feed with a water-soluble ericaceous fertilizer. Now, the second thing to avoid, and again, this is another really common problem, and that is to position your camellia in the wrong site. And I'll show you why. See this one behind me? This is one of our camellias, and I will show you where I put it and the reason why. Now, the camellia genus, I mean, they're kind of around China, Japan, that kind of Asian area, and typically they are woodland plants. So if you bring them out into full sun, you know, you're going to get scorching. You really want to keep these not in full shade, but certainly semi-shade. If you see here, we planted this one just below a tree, so for most of the time we've got protection. There's no scorching on that leaf whatsoever, and that's quite a big thing, because if you damage your leaves through scorch, again, you're damaging all the chlorophyll underneath, and you cause a stunted growth, you know, and it can shock the plant, and it can just sort of hibernate for a wee bit of time. So make sure not full sun, but certainly semi-shade, and really want to make sure that shade is present during the hottest part of the day. So you're looking at between about 1 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So the third mistake to avoid, and again, this is another really common problem, and that is pruning or cutting back your camellia at the wrong time. It's fine if it's an unruly plant and you just want it cut back. They're really resistant, they're tough as old boots, and even like a really serious cut, like right down to the trunk, give it a year and it will start re-sprouting and probably reflowering by the second year. I mean, I've even had it with a hard cut, flowers the following year. That's how tough these things are. But this cutting issue is about the flowering. If you cut it at the wrong time, you'll remove all of the buds. There's only one time in a year when you can happily trim back a camellia and not lose next year's flowering buds, and that is immediately after flowering. And I'd go as far as say, as the last of the blooms are finishing, cut it then, because the very next thing a camellia is going to do is put out the new bud, and part of that bud will be a leaf coming through, and the other part of that will be a flower bud. So you've got to get that right, because it's so easy to do. I see it all the time, pruning at the wrong time, losing your bud. So remember, it's just before all the flowers finish, because once the flowers are over, the plant's going to divert its energy into producing those new flower buds for next year. So that's an important one. Now, the fourth mistake to avoid is forgetting the plant's there and not watering it over periods of drought over the summer. Now, if you planted it under a tree, like many people will because you want the shade, then your tree is going to compete with your camellia regarding the amount of water that's in the soil. And especially over long hot summers where there's no rain, those deeper tree roots are going to take up so much more of the water, because a camellia root system is quite fibrous, quite high up in on the soil level. So if you forget about it and you don't water over the summer and just let it cope by itself, then it can become heat stressed and not desiccated is the wrong word, but you know, they can dry out, they can get stressed, and when that happens, what they will do is they'll drop those flower buds for next season. So be careful. Just keep an eye out of it. I mean, they don't really stand out in the borders over the summer in your garden because not much is happening. So I'm not surprised people forget that they're there, but you've got to keep it in mind. If it's hot and dry and you've got competition with a tree right next to it, then make sure over the summer it does get its fair share of water. Now, mistake number 5 is planting your camellia in a position where you're not going to see the full effect of that plant come the spring. So you see this border behind me? Let's have a closer look. So this is planted fairly densely, and there's no way that you can see any of the ericaceous plants we put in. We've got some magnolias in there, we've got rhododendrons, and we've got camellias, and you can't see any. But that doesn't mean that you won't see them in the spring, because at the end of the year, majority of these plants will die back to ground level, and that means that from our window, so we've got a key window in the kitchen where we look out and see the garden most of the time, and you need to make sure that you plant these camellias where they will be shown to full effect in the spring, because let's be honest, they can be quite pricey. You want to get the most out of them. You want to be able to see that glorious flowering. So bear that in mind. Always make sure that when you buy these plants, when they're in flower, you will be able to see them. If it was in flower today, you wouldn't be able to see a thing. Absolutely not. But we specifically planted it in a position where you can see all these key spring flowering ericaceous plants with no obstructions at all come the spring. Anyway, thank you for watching, and if you've got anything that you want to add, any great advice regarding camellias, then leave those in the comments. We would love to hear from you. If you want to see more videos like this, then consider subscribing to the channel. It is absolutely free, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video. Thank you and goodbye.